Welcome back to the cryptowrld channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now, while Bitcoin is still running into this significant resistance, the short-term bearish divergence is continuing to influence the price of Bitcoin right now, while more liquidity is also building just above the price of Bitcoin. So I'll be talking about that in just a moment, alongside Solana, which is now starting to break below this key Fibonacci level, while the price of Chainlink is currently rejecting from this critical Fibonacci area. So I'll be talking about all of that and more later in the video, so definitely watch to the end. First of all, starting off on the 4-day Bitcoin price chart, and right now the super trend indicator is still sitting in the red, so not much has changed on this chart over the last one day. So getting straight into this weekly Bitcoin chart, and technically speaking, we still have a massive bearish divergence we need to watch out for on the weekly time frame. So once again, not a lot has changed on this chart over the last one day. So getting straight into this weekly Bitcoin chart, and as of right now, the weekly Bitcoin MACD is of course moving closer towards a bullish crossover, as I've been talking about over the last few weeks here on the channel. And so at the current rate, we're potentially still around 1 or 2 weeks away from a bullish crossover actually confirming here in this indicator on this time frame. But with that being said, even though we've not yet confirmed a bullish crossover, of course we are moving closer towards one. We're in the recovery out of all of this previous bearish momentum that we saw over the last few months. And so at least for now, that is still the situation on this weekly Bitcoin price chart. And if we're taking a look at this 3-day Bitcoin price chart, of course, after that major breakout beyond this resistance at 86 to 88,000, we went straight up towards the next significant area of resistance, which based on this chart right here is sitting at approximately 96,000. And so obviously that is still the strong resistance to pay attention to at around 96,000. And as for support, if we were to see a decent rejection here, I would expect a lot of support in between this area based on previous resistance, flipping into new support at around 86 to 88,000. And if we're taking a look at this daily Bitcoin chart, technically speaking, the bullish divergence on the daily time frame is still currently active, but of course, just in the somewhat shorter term here, we are cooling off from close to overbought territories in the daily Bitcoin RSI. And so the price action that we've seen over the last half a week, for almost 1 week now, this should not be surprising at all if you've been watching this channel over the last 1 week. Obviously, I talked about that exact short squeeze right around here, and then I talked about how it's very likely we're going to see a bit of a cool off, just a slow down here to help to reset the RSI in the coming days, just in the short term. And so far that's perfectly playing out. And of course, we're not only struggling in the short term due to the fact that we're resetting the RSI, cooling off a little bit, we're also once again running into key resistance, not only based on this volume profile indicator showing resistance at around 96,000, we also have the golden pocket area of resistance on this daily time frame sitting in between around 94,500 to 95,500. So really around that 95 to 96k area, that is the key resistance we need to break out above. And so just don't be surprised if we continue to struggle for a little bit here in the short term around this resistance. Once again, this is very normal price action. This is the price action that I've been talking about, how we're most likely going to see this. I've been saying that for the last week, and so far it's been playing out perfectly. And as for other support and resistance levels based on this chart right here, I would expect support based on this previous 50% retracement level sitting at approximately 90 to 91,000, acting as support if we were to see a pullback here. But if we could finally see a breakout above 95 to 96,000 with confirmation, so candle closes confirming ideally above 96k, in that situation we could find a small amount of resistance at just above 98,000, and then more resistance at around 101,000. But once we break through those levels, basically we're on our way towards all-time highs. But in the meantime, if we're zooming into the shorter term, looking at the 4-hour time frame, of course this short-term bearish divergence for now is still affecting the price of Bitcoin. We're still seeing one of the most common outcomes from a bearish divergence, because as I always say, we usually see either choppy sideways price action or perhaps a slight pullback from a bearish divergence as the most common outcomes. And considering the fact that the RSI on the 4-hour Bitcoin price chart here is still trending in the bearish direction, still forming lower highs and lower lows, this is telling us that the bearish divergence on the 4-hour time frame is still affecting the price of Bitcoin in the short term. And so basically continue to expect the same sort of price action that we've seen over the last half a week or so as the most likely scenario just in the short term. Maybe for the next few days, maybe a little bit longer, but once again, just in the short term, term, this is a very likely scenario, as I've already been saying here on the channel. But the longer we just chop around sideways in the short term, the better, because as you can see here, while the price is somewhat trading sideways and seeing a slight little pullback, that is helping to reset the RSI out of overbought territories in the case of the 4-hour time frame. But on the daily time frame, we're already starting to reset a little bit here in the RSI. So if this continues for a little longer, of course, that will reset the RSI further, which can give us more room towards the upside later on. And so once again, at least based on this chart, looking at the momentum right now, we're still in the recovery out of the correction, at least based on the MACD on the weekly time frame. But with that being said, in the immediate short term for the next few days, expect the price to continue to struggle for a little while. But if we're taking a look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, obviously we have a lot of liquidity building just above the price of Bitcoin. And so we can see here that most of the liquidity in the shorter term is sitting at very close to 96,000, give or take. Basically, it's starting just under 96,000 and also just above 96,000. So really that 96K level is a very key level for Bitcoin. That is massive resistance based on this chart and also this chart right here, and also a lot of liquidity at around 96,000. And of course, we also have to be aware of the possibility that we could just come up to grab that liquidity, but not necessarily see candle closes above 96,000. And in that situation, it's possible we could just see another short-term rejection and possibly extend a short-term bearish divergence with perhaps a slight higher high just to grab the liquidity, see a rejection because we're still finding resistance here, and the RSI on the smaller time frames might still be in lower highs, creating another bearish divergence basically. And so we do have to be aware of that possibility. But for now, once again, the liquidation heat map is telling us that it's very likely, never a guarantee, but very likely sometime soon, possibly over the next 1 week, that sort of time frame, sometime soon, it's likely will come up towards around 96,000, give or to take out that liquidity. And so that is still the situation in the short term. Once again, expect the price to struggle for the most part, especially around this key resistance here. But overall, if we're looking at this larger momentum, technically we are looking more bullish than bearish. And so when it comes to my exact Bitcoin trading strategy right now, my trading strategy has not changed over the last few days. So of course, if you've been watching this channel for the last 1 week, give or take, you'll know about my Bitcoin long position, which I entered at this previous breakout here. Once we started a breakout above around 88,000, that was a key point to open a long position, which I shared here on the channel very transparently back then. And then since opening that long position down here close to 88,000, give or take, I took a small amount of profits at close to 94,000, give or take, just slightly reducing the size of the trade, because right here I said it's very likely that in the short term we're going to start to slow down and struggle for a little while, which obviously is perfectly playing out. But obviously I did not close the entire position, I just slightly reduced the size of the trade and of course moved my stop loss into profit. So overall, I am still long on the price of Bitcoin. And if you want to actually trade these moves in the price of Bitcoin or any other crypto, like what I'm doing right now to easily profit in the crypto market, of course, you have to be set up ready to go on a crypto exchange. And personally, I'm taking this trade right here over on 2bit. So I'll make sure to leave a link to 2bit below this video in the description and in the pinned comment. And if you use that link, it'll take you to this page right here where you can claim some massive trading bonuses, like for example, up to $50,000 in trading rewards. But if you're not one of the larger traders here, you can also get a $30 sign up bonus and also a 20% deposit rebate up to a max of 200 USDT. So for example, if you deposit $1,000, you get a $200 bonus. And in case you're wondering, 2bit is a no KYC exchange, which means you can access it from basically any country in the world without needing any KYC. But as always, check your local regulations when it comes to trading crypto. And for whatever reason, if you don't want 2bit as an exchange, there's also BTNex as another option out there, another exchange that I also trade on. So I'll also make sure to leave a link to BTNex below this video. And if you use that link, it'll take you to this page right here where you can also claim some massive trading bonuses, like for example, up to 35,000 in USDT. And so if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, you might as well check this out. Once again, the first and second link below this video. And in case you're wondering, BTNex is also a no KYC exchange. But with that being said, taking a look at Ethereum on the weekly time frame, and honestly, not a lot has changed on the weekly Ethereum chart over the last 1 day. Technically, we're still within the larger bearish trend, also known as a bear market, but of course, still holding above this significant area of of support, which is still sitting in between 1.4k to 1550. And if we're zooming into the daily Ethereum price chart, obviously right now the price of ETH is continuing to struggle around that 1.8k level. Of course, in the short term over the last half a week or so, we briefly broke out above 1.8k, and then since then we've actually seen a slight little break below 1.8k. So clearly the price of ETH for now is simply getting stuck around that area. But of course, one of the main reasons as to why we're seeing a bit of sideways price action just bouncing around here in the short term is due to the fact that that's pretty much exactly what we're seeing for Bitcoin in the short term. As I always say, expect similar price action to what Bitcoin is doing for a lot of the major altcoins. Of course, not the exact same price action, but if Bitcoin struggles in the short term around key resistance, that will likely affect Ethereum and a lot of the altcoins. And so honestly, if you're only into altcoins, still pay attention to what Bitcoin is doing, because that can really tell us what is likely going to happen for a lot of the altcoin market. And with that being said, taking a look at Solana on the 3-day time frame, technically speaking, this massive bullish divergence is still active, so not much has changed on this chart over the last one day. And if we're taking a look at this daily Solana chart, what has changed over the last one day is that we're starting to now break below this key Fibonacci level of previous resistance, which was short-term support right here, and that was sitting at around 146 to 147. And so especially if we confirm this daily candle close well below around 146, in that situation that would technically confirm the break back below this level, which at least in the short term for the next few days, the next week, that sort of time frame, that would be a bit of a bearish signal here. And the next support that I'll be watching out for would be sitting at around 135 to 136 based on previous significant resistance flipping into new support, and below around 135 to 136 I would expect more support at around 124 to 125. And of course, if we confirm the break below around 146 here, in that situation that would likely flip into new resistance again, so keep that in mind. But once again, ultimately just pay attention to what Bitcoin is doing. If Bitcoin continues to struggle here in the short term, that can affect Solana as well. But overall, if we're looking at the price structure for Solana, we've clearly seen a change in price structure, with the recent high, of course, being the first higher high in the price on the daily time frame that we've seen in months. After this bearish trend right here on the daily time frame, we're potentially forming a new bullish trend if we can simply now create a higher low in the price. And if we're taking a look at the price of XRP on the 3-day time frame, technically this large bearish divergence is still affecting the price of XRP, as I've been saying for months now on the channel, since much higher prices. So not much has changed on this chart over the last one day. And if we're taking a look at the daily time frame, technically we're still within the descending parallel channel, which is effectively a bearish trend forming lower highs and lower lows. But during the descending parallel channel, obviously we can see short-term bullish reliefs, and that's what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. And when it comes to support and resistance to watch out for, right now we are running into a bit of support based on previous resistance flipping into new support, and that's sitting at give or take $2.15 to $2.17, around there. But if we start breaking below that level, in that situation we have more support at around $2.05 to $2.07, and more support potentially closer towards $2. And as for resistance, we do have a bit of short-term resistance here at around $2.35 to $2.36, but the next significant point of resistance is at around $2.45. And once again, simply just pay attention to what Bitcoin is doing. So if Bitcoin struggles in the short term, expect something similar for XRP and a lot of the altcoins. And if we're taking a look at the price of Chainlink on the daily time frame, of course, Chainlink, just like Bitcoin, is struggling around key resistance, but Chainlink is currently seeing a little bit more of a rejection from that resistance. And of course, this resistance is still sitting in between 1490 to 1550, which is the same resistance I've been talking about for months now on the channel, since basically before we saw these previous rejections all the way back here. So obviously that 1550 level is the key level of resistance that we need to break out above in order to finally start to flip much more bullish again for the price of Chainlink. And in that situation, if we were to see a confirmed breakout with candle closes confirming above $15.50, in that situation I would expect a continued relief fairly quickly up towards around $17.50 to $17.60 if we first confirm this breakout. But obviously in the meantime, we're continuing to struggle around this resistance, and while Bitcoin struggles in the short term, of course that will not make this breakout any easier for Chainlink. It will obviously put more pressure on Chainlink here. But like I've mentioned recently here on the channel, if we continue more of a rejection in the coming days, that's not necessarily all bad news for Chainlink, because we have a possible inverse head and shoulders pattern forming here, which still needs to actually be formed. Obviously, we're just in the formation phase. We need to see a further rejection and then some sort of bounce at roughly $12.50 to $13, and then come back up and break out above $15.50 in order to actually confirm that. And if that confirms, of course, that will set up a massive bullish price target for that price pattern well beyond $20 per Chainlink. But for now, once again, we're still in the formation phase and we're still quite a long way from potentially confirming that pattern. And so overall, not a lot has changed for Chainlink over the last one day. And once again, if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of any crypto, check out those links below this video to those exchanges if you want to claim those massive trading bonuses that are only available using those links. And if you want to actually know how you can trade crypto no matter what the price is doing, then make sure to watch these videos popping up right here on your screen. The video in the top left shows you how you can profit from bullish or bearish price action using long positions or short positions, and the video in the bottom left shows you how you can easily profit from choppy sideways price action. But anyway, that is everything that I have to say for today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.